Greetings, this is Warrior King, and the time has come for the lions and the lioness to tell their own story. This is the lion's voice. Give thanks and praise for the wonderful blessing that's been poured on me. Give thanks and praise. Jah use I as an instrument to set the people free. Jah give her the powers to chant. Jah give her the powers to chant. Rastafari, the lion's voice.
What are you waiting for? Come together, calling from near and far. Know who you are. What are you waiting for? Rally up, it takes the dust. What are you waiting for? Ancestors paved the way for us. Yes, I am Ketis Oyonde, asking, what are you waiting for to come together? The time has come for the lions to tell our own story. This is the lion's voice.
Yes, job people, this is Michael Shamai representing. I will say, hear the lion voice, saying it is time for the lions and the lionesses to tell their own story. King David killed Goliath with a stone, we original dread.
The fittest of the fittest shall survive. My people, open your eyes. Wake up. Blessed love, this is Queen Omega representing for all lions and lionesses. With the lion's voice, we come to tell our story. Rastafari, live it. Hey, the lion's voice, Rastafari.
It's AWTITUDE representing for Lion's Voice. Yes, massive. This is the time for I and I, the lion, them to tell I and I story, our story. Yes, and we reign and rule like this. Reign and rule, yeah. Selassie, I reign and rule. You can't take the lion vibes, people. If you no fool, cause we know Selassie reign and rule. Reign and rule. Selassie, I reign and rule. Queen Omega drop them in the fire, pull from them, no Queen Omega, she reign and rule. Royal Kushite, ancient essence, Emperor Selassie in a majestical presence, flash of all sevens, projecting through I and I events. We sing a song for the king, we bring joy and blessing and overstanding, yeah. We hear Jah every day, hey. Reign and rule, yeah. Selassie, reign and rule. Yes, I lion vibes, Selassie, reign and rule. Attitude say that Boondocks, Black Organization of Global Diplomats optimizing expressions to the world. Till the world, till the end.
Amina, the time has come for the lioness to tell our own story. No surrender, no retreat, we are Jaja soldier. Rougher than the streets, tougher than a boulder. Bigging up Lamb's voice. Now put it, I jolly for say that.
I will never stop, hail the Most High, and I will never stop, call Rastafari. Blessed love, this is Kushite representing for the Lion's Voice. We are here to tell our own story, Rastafari.
Yeah, David Dread of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying hail to Lion Voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Well, lion voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion voice.
Jano, I'm so hungry, bro. I haven't eaten all day. Like, it started to hurt me too. Like, what more could I eat right now?
What about a city samosa? get your samosa, a fusion of Indian, Jamaican, and African culture. City samosas, the best samosas in the city.
The second beast was given the power to give breath unto the image of the first beast so that the image could speak, and caused all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced the people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hands and in their forehead. Gone down in the new world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them prison cell, that's new slave ship. New world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them video game, that's new matrix. It's a new world order. Them start bleaching, diverse doctrine, them start preaching. Angels for the stars they reaching, they're falling, never hear the lion calling. New world order, them fight against the poor. Machine and robot that sweep them floor. Machine and robot that run them stores. So them create disease ones without any fear. The new world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them prison cell, that's new slave ship. New world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them video game, that's new matrix. It's a new world order. Them pan cell phone, families don't even talk in their home. Village farmers get murdered by drones. Village mistress get murdered by stones. New world, so you better call Tyrone. Tell him prepare, use the whole earth a war zone. New world, Satan lost for the throne, so we must accept us and leave him alone. The new world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them prison cell, that's new slave ship. New world order, new world order. Happy work harder, happy pray harder. Babylon them coming with them microchip, and them video game, that's new matrix. It's a new world order. Check the energy, make it so hard to go have a family. Man, woman and child, well that are the trinity. Preserve the bloodline, Solomonic dynasty. Vatican them say a beat at them malice and them thief. Harvest and them reap for the global elite. As when the elder him said, don't you weep, the lion destroyed.
What do you have to tell the people about Rastafari?
Light to the world. King of kings and the conquering line of the tribe of Judah. I elected himself, first rightful ruler. Hey yo! Yeah, hear them high, hear the black king on the 23rd of July. So tell them guy, who praise God up in the sky, it's a lie. The Almighty living on your night. From ancient time, them a try. Them Romans know them just open them suit and ties. Criminals ain't got no alibi, they stole my people. Then them come without them genocide.
Are you talking about slavery?
Them couldn't kill the lion way come conquer Judah tribe. Go through tribulation, and I strive, see sufferation, and I still rise. That's why we tell them in America, live Rastafari in every ghetto area. We come if you tell them in a Toronto, straight at it. Greetings in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First. Glory and honor in the name of His chosen Queen, Empress was Zero Menen. My name is Kwasi Bonsu, aka the Dejazmatch Kwasi, aka Ras Kwasi, aka the Reading Ras, aka the Pan-African Happy Man, creative industry attorney. I'm an author, I'm an artist, I'm an actionist, and right now I am the host of Lion Talk Live. Welcome to Lion Talk Live, and welcome to the Lion Voice Network, where lions are telling our own story. Welcome to African Liberation Month. The month of May, African Liberation Day is fast approaching. May 25th. We are celebrating the founding of the Organization of African Unity. It's called Africa Day now. It started off as Africa Liberation Day, but we also have African Victory Day in this month, May 5th. So this month we are celebrating here on the Lion Voice Network as African Liberation Month. So because it's African Liberation Month, we've been focusing on the African liberation. We spoke with Rasa Huma Akansi, the chair of the Rastafari Council of Ghana, the chair of the Rastafari Continental Council. His interview, we have the first 2 clips now streaming on the platform. Actually, I think we released 3 clips. We're getting ready to drop that full episode on Friday. African voices, I think it's important that we talk to Rastafari born and raised on the continent, just as we talk to Rastafari around the world. African born Rastafari have something to say. We also have the Honorable Mike Palm, if you haven't seen that, our first Nigerian Rastafari elder, who giving us the history of Rastafari in Nigeria. Only here on the Lion Voice Network are we really showcasing the global power of the Rastafari uprising, and it's still unfolding. It's still coming to fore. Tonight, we are going to be starting our series on Rastafari and STEM. For those who are not familiar, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. You also have STEAM, where they add arts to that, but I'm going to focus on STEM because we are already very creative. And we have the Association of Rastafari Creatives, RastafariCreatives.com. You can go check out over there for all the Rastafari creatives watching the platform. But tonight's guest, we're going to have an in-depth reasoning on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because if we're going to build Zion, if we're building an alternative to Babylon, we got to build our own schools, our own hospitals, our roads, eco-friendly, balance the thing, that whatever the vision that we envision, it's going to have to be built physically. And we're going to need architects, engineers, scientists, all manner of the STEM fields, mathematicians. I'm editing an episode with a young mathematician in Jamaica. He has a math tutoring service doing powerful work down in Jamaica. We're going to have him. We're going to have other brethren and sistren who are within the STEM, other engineers. I want the global family to realize, again, when you see Rastafari, we're not just an artist run out on a stage. We're not just herb smokers. There are Rastafari doing all manner of technical work, all manners of intellectual fortitude. His Majesty has risen from the 4 corners of the earth. So tonight's guest is a good brethren of mine. I'm looking forward to this reasoning. I've known this brethren almost 30 years. We're coming up in them type of numbers. I met this brethren at Howard University. At that time, he was engineering student, now world-class engineer. So we're going to get into his journey to becoming an engineer. We're going to get into all of these things, again, exclusive here on the Lion Voice Network. Before we bring forward the guests, if this is your first time on the platform, welcome. If you subscribe, you're part of the Lion Pride. We just passed 40,000, and I want to just take the time to acknowledge the whole global family.
We're going to be doing our celebration episode, so stay tuned. Celebration episode, we invite ones to come up. We put the link in the comments. You know, everyone can just come up. We reason on a live just to mark the time and so that people can get to know our Lion Pride. We're building a strong, powerful online community, and trust me, it's a movement, you know, historic movement that's unfolding within Rastafari and the Pan-African family. So I want to just thank everyone for us reaching 40,000 subscribers, and we're on our way to 50,000. So stay tuned. Big up all of the Lion Pride. Big up the Lion Pride on Patreon. We just had a new member, Brother Stan. Big up yourself. Our newest member, we're at 36 now on the Lion Pride on Patreon. Big up Ras Maki, who just joined our Ubuntu Lion Pride, $70 in US and up. One-time attribution gets you as a part of our Ubuntu Lion Pride, and we're building that. So we try to make it easy for one to support the platform. And we take the time to do the housekeeping because that's where we're at in our nation. We got to take care of our housekeeping so that what we build is sustainable. It don't make sense we coming out with all this content and 2 years from now you're looking for you can't find I had to shut down because it wasn't sustainable. You know what I mean? That don't make no sense. We got to build institutions that we can have staff, hire people, you know, upgrade the content, blockbuster films, animation, all these things. If we're not thinking on that level as Rastafari people, then we're not keeping up with the time. You know, I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be diplomatic, but we're not serious if we're not doing that. So that's why you see I take the time. That's why you see the commercials in the beginning of Rastafari Pan-African businesses. We take the time here to take the housekeeping first before we get into the content, because we want people to know this don't just happen by a miracle. There is an infrastructure that we're building. We're being very intentional to build out our infrastructure. So those who see the vision and support with their dollars, we give thanks. We're practicing radical economic collective security for the Armageddon because we feel that our voice as Rastafari should be heard. Among all of the other, you know, talking heads you can find on the internet right now, high level Rastafari reasoning have to be there, family. So big up the Lion Pride on Patreon, big up the Ubuntu Lion Pride. For those who do the super chats, the Zelle, the CashApp, however you support the Action Lion Pride, we big you up same way. Wherever you are, we meet you right there. You know what I mean? We don't discriminate over here. You don't have a dollar, you like, you comment, you share. This is the way that we are building. We built this from zero to where we are today, and we're not gonna stop. So big up Action Lion Pride, big up the Watch and Peep too. If you just watch or you just come to peep and bad mind and say, what is this Ras talking about? And you hate watching, we big up and we love the same way, because you're boots in the algorithm and you're part of the history as well. So big up everyone who is part of this massive uprising. When I'm drinking during this episode, I'll be drinking from my brethren's tumbler. This is Rasledge, Ramia King Design, one of our local Rastafari brethren here. We're also sponsored by CMOS Life, Frontline Books. Always have to big up brother Carl Philpotts, who's coming on board as well. We have the book here. We're about to have the link for all of you. You can go and support the latest edition. So this is a community. When you see I'm just the one who was called to set the structure by Kadamawi Selassie the first, but this is a community. This is a global uprising that the item are witnessing and that the item are a part of in real time. And this is why we're not looking to go viral. Yes, the viral moment may come, but that's not the aim. The aim is to give us that medicine to feed the root. That's why no matter what, we have to talk about STEM. you know what I mean, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If we're not having these reasonings as a Rastafari family, how can we call ourselves a nation and we're not reasoning about STEM? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Check in, Lion Pride. I see the item coming in. Check in when you come in, where you're watching from. All right, so I'm gonna introduce my guest. It's a great pleasure, housekeeping out of the way, to introduce this guest. I've known this guest again. We're coming on them 25, 30. You know, we're up in them high numbers now. You know what I mean? We both still look young, but we've known each other for some time. You know, we both have youths now. We didn't have youths when we met. We met at Howard University, one of my brethren. And one of the reasons that I started this channel is because when I was online, the representation of Rastafari didn't reflect the reality that I was living. You know what I mean? I came up in the Liberty with brethren who were engineers, architects, you know, holding Bingy Man, holding the Liberty firm. You know what I mean? And when I was online, I was only seeing artists. You know what I mean? I was only seeing, you know, maybe one and two farmer. You don't even see the farmer so much. But there's so much diversity within I and I Rastafari. And I want to show the item and share with the item some of I good brethren. We don't always agree. Sometimes I have to take him on a basketball court and shift him up to, you know what I mean, them way there. But is a beautiful soul and a brilliant civil engineer. So Lion Pride, help I to welcome and I good brethren, Ras Leo, Ras Kulcha, Dumond. Welcome.
Yo. Well, I thought I wasn't gonna get through that introduction right there.
Yeah, I gotta
Just
season the pot. I gotta season the pot.
I'm loving. What's up, Fire? What's up, man?
We're here giving thanks for life and for strength. I see that I representing the HU today. We give thanks, Haiti, representing. And the brethren was also on a panel that we did for his massive visit to the Caribbean. So if you didn't see that, go check out the panel. Proud Haitian Roots. So custom here on the Lion Voice Network, we're gonna ask the eye to step into our heretical time machine as a griot. Take us to give us your origin story. Take us to the moment of your birth and your journey to Rastafari. Paint the picture of who is Leo Dumond. What was the journey? You know what I mean?
All right. Well, you know, I was born and raised in a little town called Little Haiti, Miami, Florida. You know, and I'm basically from the inner city of Miami. Anyone that knows anything about Little Haiti, you know, knows the environment. But it's an inner city neighborhood. You know, both of my parents are from Haiti. I'm one of 7 children from on my mom's side, and my dad's side I can't count. You know, but I'm the last of the 7. And yeah, pretty much, you know, born and raised in Little Haiti. Before Little Haiti was Little Haiti, you know, it was another town called Lemon City, you know, before the large influx of Haitian immigrants. And so, you know, my journey towards Rastafari began through that experience in Little Haiti. I was at a point in time in my life, you know, growing up in that environment. You know, it was tough. Like, you know, us Haitians had to stand up and fight. People who were of Haitian descent, you know, had to stand up and fight. You know, I really didn't have the same problems like a lot of other Haitian people were having because I was born and raised in Miami. So, you know, I was cool with a lot of people, you know, but it was just a tough environment that created a lot of violence, you know, and so, you know, people were clicking up, you know what I'm saying? And so I went to a school called Edison, I went to Edison Elementary. I went to Edison Middle School. I went to Edison Senior. These are all well-known schools in that area. And you know, going through those schools or whatever have you, and going through the trials and tribulations, it just led me to a point. I had all kinds of different things that happened in my life. I was always into the Bible. I was always into my brethren and such, like my culture. But I went basically from being, as if you will, I was in a very Christian for a while, like, if you will, you call like the New Age Christian and stuff like that. I used to take my Bible in the 7th grade. I used to take my Bible to school, big book. I used to be known to walk with my Bible. And so anyway, from that time, by the time I got to high school, I had met some brethren or whatever have you, and then the brethren started educating me on the blackness of the Bible, because I came to him like, yo, let me tell you about the word of Jesus Christ and all this other stuff, and then he was like, learn that. he was a 5%er, he was from New York, and so he started telling me all about 5% Nation of Islam, and so I started getting more and more into that, and learning about the African story, you know what I mean, and then it just dawned on me like, yeah, the brethren telling a lot of truth, you know what I'm saying? So that's how I started really getting into my black righteous mindset, if you will, understanding that this was our story. It wasn't just a story about the images that they had to pick. Well, anyway, long story short, from that time, started getting in trouble, incidentally, because like I said, our neighborhoods were tough. I grew up around a lot of, individuals that became, into, they were tough guys, you know what I'm saying? They got into crime and violence and drugs and all this other stuff, Some of it started, how it is, you know what I'm saying? Kind of start innocent, like skipping school.
For our international viewers, when you talk about Miami, Little Haiti, that's one of those notorious ghetto areas, you know what I mean? That, around America, that's going to be one of the most notorious of them all.
I want to be clear too about just like the Little Haiti neighborhood. It's a Lemon City, it's a mixture of different neighborhoods. The heart of Little Haiti was originally called Lemon City, but it's not like a big project. You know what I'm saying? It's not like big project. It's mixed, So you have patches of Little Haiti that's very affluent.
Okay.
And then you have that depends on what side of the railroad tracks you in. Then you have other neighborhoods that have large scale apartment buildings that had a mix of income types in those apartment buildings, and so just the whole neighborhood just evolved into a way where you had a mixture of economic backgrounds, and so, but the Little Haiti, because it's in Miami, is right next to Liberty City, Liberty City is just west of us,
notorious area. That's another notorious.
Yeah. So big up to Liberty City too, big up to all my brethren and sisters over there.
I've been pulled over in Liberty City. I got a Liberty City story. And I mean,
well, you better be careful.
Family down there.
But all right, so anyway, let me just get to it. So just that environment had caused me to be around, certain brethren. We had to get together, and so, my brethren them start, burning herb and stuff like that, and they introduced me to the herb, and from there, that's when I came around certain Rastafari people, that's how I got in touch, so I had, we had run into a group of these crazy dreadlocks on 62nd Street called the Naya Bingi brethren. So I had a bunch of they're not crazy, I'm just joking, but it was like a Naya Bingi house that was on 62nd, 62nd Street and Northeast 5th Avenue, right on the border of Biscayne Boulevard. And so my brethren them had introduced me to these other youths. So one of my good brethren too was from Trinidad. His name is Richard. And so him being a Trini, he was already like, into the culture a little bit. And so he had put us on it, me and my other partner, Taxi. And so anyway, so we had start, visiting the house more and more or whatever have you. And we had a brethren there named Iration. He's from Guyana, part of the Tong family. So Iration, it's Danielle Tong, and there's a whole gang of the Tong family or whatever have you. And so that's how I was first, introduced to them. Next door to them is my good brethren. He's the one that really kind of established the place. His name is Rasa Beatty, and his story is a great story in and of itself. And he had,
we're gonna definitely reach out and have him on the platform. One of the founders and elders.
It's a must. It's a must. So so I was lucky. I was fortunate enough to be around, certain people that was just like really strong and heartical, and they went through a struggle, in a way that strengthened them such, it made them tough. Like they say, iron sharpen iron, so that made them real tough and stuff, and so they was able to give I that knowledge. So I end up from that time, like I said, school wasn't really interesting to me anymore because like when we went to school, we got into fights. It wasn't a positive learning environment at a senior high. When I went to school, it was fights all the time, every Friday or every day, any type of thing, and not just fights, just fisticuffs. I'm talking about huge gang fights and shots and stuff like that. So it's tough. It was tough, what I'm saying? And so me not wanting to continue in that environment, yeah. And so me not wanting to continue in that environment as far as like, because it was just going to be more and more problems. That's what was going to happen. Yeah. And so just hanging around the brethren and stuff. So I just really got to a point where I said, I'm dropping out of school, So I ended up dropping out of school.
Stick a pin. You were in Miami in the 80s?
Born and raised, man.
So you saw talk about the cocaine. That's like the cocaine capital in the 1980s. Miami Vice. People watching these things. I don't know if people know how serious
the 80s and the 90s. The 80s and the 90s.
The 80s and the 90s. I don't know if people know because that's one of the importation spaces. You have a lot of gunplay that was happening down there in them times, very perilous, So what was that like as a young youth growing up, immigrant parents, were you nervous walking through these communities sometime, or how did they cope?
No, not nervous. It's my home, But it's just like during those times, it's like, okay, things start evolving slowly because you got to remember I was young, what I'm saying? So there was, some of the OGs that we was already around, I was sitting down wondering like, what's going on with them, why they getting in these fights or whatever have you. And then you hear this person killed this person and it's my good brethren, And next thing you know, the OG that you used to be playing basketball with, or who used to be like having your back after school, he doing life. You know what I'm saying? So we had a set of generation that was ahead of us that was already into like defending the territory. You understand what I'm saying? And so the dope, I'm gonna just speak fluently, but I hope
that's what we want.
Yeah. So the dope really wasn't like it was in our neighborhood, but it wasn't as far as like permeated. It hadn't permeated the entire culture of the Little Haiti neighborhood at that time, Everyone knows, anyone that knows the story of Miami have to understand that Miami is the city that was financed on the back of cocaine money, a lot of other things too, because Miami is a port city as well, and so what comes through the port, all kind of good things come through the port, all kind of bad things come through the port, and so Miami is a place that had all kinds of neighborhoods, of pockets of neighborhoods of people doing everything, all kind of different things. So it was already starting to. It wasn't the big party town that it is now. Okay. So when I grew up in the 80s, I was like 83, I was 10, so I date myself, you know what I'm saying? So 83, I was like 10 years old, you know what I'm saying? So I grew up when everything was exploding. Hip hop was just starting to come on the scene.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Cable TV and like MTV, a lot of us of our generation, we kind of experienced the same thing, We didn't know a lot about what was happening on other places until, we start seeing, these people on cable, you know what I mean? And so the hip hop scene, all that stuff was starting to grow. But yeah, in my neighborhood, it was just I was always protected, so there was no fear. We were I was always around people that had already established the situation over there,
Okay.
And so there are certain other neighborhoods where you just I don't care who you are, you're not gonna go there at night. It's feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But we had no issues, and that's the whole thing. Like my family is big, my cousins are big, and all this other stuff. And I had brothers, stepbrothers that did life, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I am, very much an original little Haiti individual. You understand what I'm saying? So I've seen it all, and I could tell you a whole lot. But bottom line is, once I started,
Naya Bingy
House. So once I got into the Bingy House, it became clear to me, like, hey, you know what I'm saying, I didn't want to go to school anymore, so I dropped out 10th grade. I failed the 10th grade, and that's what made me say, okay, I'm really going to drop out now, because it was like I had failed the 7th grade because I was getting in trouble. Yeah, not because of intelligence, obviously, just because of just skipping school and hanging.
This is important because this brethren is a world-class engineer now. We're going to get to that, but you see that failure earlier in life doesn't determine the trajectory.
But it wasn't failure. The whole thing, like, to me, I can't. I'm sorry. Yeah. But the whole thing is like,
this is a blockbuster movie. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like I never felt it like I was failing at what I was doing. You know what I mean? It was just more like an evolution of things that was occurring, And so when I did fail the first time, because I didn't go to school, I never failed because of anything other than that. But I didn't want to. I was hanging out with my boys. You know what I'm saying? We skipping school, smoking herb, wilding out on the beach and all this other stuff. So we was doing that from time you was 7th grade. Now 7th grade, what are you, like 12 or something? I don't know. And then so we were doing it and we were encouraged to do it. You understand what I'm saying? We weren't the only ones. Everyone in our school, not everyone, but a lot of us was doing it.
Yeah.
And so, you can imagine at that age, you're impressionable. So I got myself, my mom actually, beat the hell out of me, because I had got locked up. Rest in peace to my mom. You know what I'm saying? I can say that. They can't lock her up now.
Yes.
But yeah, when I got in trouble with the law as a juvenile, mom came pick me up from the station. Boy, she whooped me up that day. You know what I'm saying? And then I started straightening up a little bit, and that's when I tell you I started getting into more spiritual.
Yes.
And from there, I started doing well. But then, again, like I said, got to the 10th grade. By the time I got to the 10th grade, it was back to this crazy stuff that was going on. So I just was like, listen, I'm going to be with the brethren them. I'm trying to learn more about, reality and what life. And the Bingy House, our Bingy House, as all Bingy House are, it was referred to as New Jerusalem Schoolroom. You understand what I'm saying? And in New Jerusalem schoolroom, we were learning about our African history. We were learning about world history. We was learning about um, the Bible. We were learning about agriculture. We were learning how to be self-reliant, independent. You know, and so it was about economic empowerment for us. And so we were just living that life, and I was attracted to that. You know, so certain brethren after a little bit like took me in from there, and from there I let it pause. But basically, I was in the Bingy house at that time. I became like a resident of the Bingy house. My brethren Abedi, actually brought me in. I had left my mom's house. My mom gave me an ultimatum, basically to cut my little locks. When my locks was little, to cut my little locks, or to I was like 17 or something, or leave. And so I left. You know what I'm saying? And so, but my brethren them took me in and just showed me everything that I know about Rastafari, and then I started growing from there.
Okay.
So I'll pause right there. And I'll let you know how, if you want to know how I got to Howard. That's the different.
That's where I was gonna take it. But before that, how did you make that leap in terms of acknowledging the divinity of His Imperial Majesty? How did what was that journey like for the eye?
Yeah. Okay. So like I told you, I was around. I had met a 5%er. You know what I'm saying? Brethren, he used to call himself Supreme. His name was Ryan something. But so Ryan was telling me about God is black. You know what I'm saying? And he was like, the stories of Christ in the Bible are about, black people. And he's like, told me about where these things were taking place. And, he's like, hey, they call it the Middle East. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't even have a good understanding of geography, So, and he was like, yeah, the Middle East is really part of Africa. It's just been separated by Africa by a man-made canal called the Suez Canal. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so I looked it up, and then sure enough, so I started putting one and one together. You know what I mean? And so so from that story right there, and then coming around, and then also being into Christianity, I had done a lot of Bible study at that point in time, and from there I started learning more about El Haj Malik Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. I had read his autobiography. So I just started getting more into like a black culture and a black perspective of understanding art, just seeing the world through the lens of what it was, And my brethren them at the Bingy house, Iration, I can remember Iration had a big portrait of His Majesty standing up in the uniform, in the black uniform with his regalia, his general regalia. And I was like, who is this man? Iration was like, that's my father, I was like, so, but I'm trying to, I'm like, your father, and then, His Majesty looked pretty light skinned, and I was like, man, but it looks like he's white, you know what I'm saying? But then he was like, no, he's Ethiopian, and he started telling me about Haile Selassie and stuff like that. And so once Iration started telling me about Haile Selassie, I then went to the library, Lemon City Library right over there. Just up the street from where the Bingy house was. I used to spend a lot of time in the library too, And so I went to the library, and I got a book on Rastafari, and I started reading this book about, Rastafari and Haile Selassie and stuff like that. So I did my research, And then as far as like, how it manifests, it's just like one of these things, Rastafari is a way of life where you can't really like sign up and become a Rasta. You know what I'm saying? You can't sign up for Rastafari, or you do a certain kind of initiation or something like that, and all of a sudden, because you went to certain nine bingies, you are Rasta. You know, you're Rasta. You're a child of Rastafari. You know, Rastafari has to grow out of you, Yovas. And so you always would have been a Rastafari, a person of that mentality. Rastafari, that's why we say that we always been Rasta. You know, it's not like when we became Rasta, it's, you know, how we manifested on earth, or when we started to manifest, you know, at this point in time. You know, that's why we say we ever living, you know, because we've been Rastafari from a long time ago. And so I started to manifest that overstanding, just from the Nyabingi, and, you know, just within myself. And it's not really any trials or tribulation, just sort of convince myself His Majesty, you know, if I had to say, okay, what's the closest thing to the Almighty on earth that matches what the stories say in the Bible? You know, you had a black man who is a king from the line of David and Solomon. So, you know, that checked that box for me. You know what I'm saying? So it made sense. And so it's not just that, because you could have said any king from that line, right? We couldn't say, well, how come Menelik is not considered like the Almighty, right? You know, Menelik the first, or even, you know, Menelik the second, or whomever, you know, why not Trados? You know, why not these different kings, Azana, or whatever have you? Well, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First also have a character within himself, a dignity, you know, within himself, and that kind of just make a person manifest and see that this individual, you know, is carrying himself in a different way. It's like a different irit. And so with that, you know, I cite up His Majesty as, you know, the true and living Almighty on earth. And, you know, I always knew, like, it wasn't a problem for me to see the Almighty as a physical man. You know what I'm saying? Because I always believed that Christ is the Almighty, you know, in the flesh on earth. And the Almighty, who had made us in His image and likeness, is likely to look like us. In other words, He would have to have eyes, nose, mouth, you know what I'm saying, feet, everything, right? So if it's His image and likeness and we look like that, so why wouldn't the Almighty be able to look like that? So it was nothing for me to think about a man manifesting himself, the Almighty manifesting Himself in the spirit of an individual, Yovas. And that's just basically how I manifested.
Give thanks. So the journey to Howard now, how do you reach from not doing well in school to being accepted into one of the top institutions of learning for Black people on the planet?
Okay. So at the Bingy house, you know, we had to survive, right? And so there was, you know, we do what Rastafari people do to survive. Let's just say that. And so we had a lot of activity in our neighborhoods, you know, and so there were people who were involved in those activities, and our whole neighborhood. You gotta understand one thing about the neighborhood where we were in Miami and Florida. It's like, it's so unique. I don't know if there's ever going to happen like that again, but everybody around us used to hustle too. So it was always, you know, right across the street is crack, right on the back is crack, right? My neighbor's selling crack, you know what I mean? So this is when we were in the crack era, if you will. It exploded. It exploded.
Yes.
So that was I was like 1990 something, 90, 91, 92, around that time, you know. So crack started exploding, you know. And so so there, our neighborhood was pretty active with cops. It was hot, as we say. And so cops was always rushing different places, you know. and they end up rushing the Bingy house. And by rushing, for those that don't understand, that means that the cops would go in, I don't know what's the formal word, but they would go and invade your home. You know what I'm saying? They kick down the door. And so cops were always rushing the spot, you know what I'm saying? So they came and rushed into the Bingy house, several times. And then in one of those raids, I got picked up and caught some charges, felony charges for cannabis. You understand what I'm saying? So for the herbs. And so because we were out there healing the nations, they wanted to charge us for a crime, By the way, the same crime, just like, the same crime that they could charging us for, they have already determined now this is legal and they selling it big corporation style. You know what I'm saying? Right. But back then they had to
I'm gonna ask you how you feel to drive around Maryland and see all these dispensaries.
Yeah,
selling herb and knowing what guy went through,
Yeah, that's great. I'm loving it, but it's just like at the same time they wanted to put like a mark on I. And the thing about Miami, not just Miami, but all of Florida and a lot of inner city neighborhoods, like when they catch you in those activities, it's felony. You know what I'm saying? So they want to put felony. A lot of people want to put felony on the black man. And I'm not just talking about a black thing or white thing or anything like that, but that's just the way it is. And in Florida, when they put felony charges on you, they get you on those felony charges. And that means that, you're going to cut off for a certain portion of civil society for a while, So you're disenfranchised in a way. You understand what I'm saying? And so they trumped up all these charges, put felony charges on me or whatever have you. But through the grace of the Almighty, my lawyer was a Howard graduate. And so my lawyer was like, hey, before we went to pretrial or something, I don't know what it was, but we had to go to court. And so he was like, you need to, so what are you doing with yourself, basically? And I was just like, I'm chilling. I'm chilling, learning about the healing of the nations. What are you talking about? I play tennis and all that stuff. And he was like, what do you do? Like, do you do anything? Like, what? He's trying to look for something positive, okay? And so he was like, you need to try to do something to show that you're not a nuisance or something to the community, before we go to court. Like, I need something to argue in your favor.
Yeah.
Situation. And so, incidentally, I had just passed my GED. Because outside of all that stuff that was going on, I was keeping an eye on my classmates of that time,
Yes.
And they were graduating, and I was just like, geez, man, my boys are graduating. And I'm like, even some of the people, like the next class caught up,
Yeah.
Because remember I told you they had retained me, you know what I'm saying? And so I was already set back on the class, and then that class graduated, and the next class was coming out. I was like, no. So moms used to always put it in our head that, hey, we can't let other people come to this country do better than us, and how we had the opportunity. She sacrificed her life, to give us the opportunity to do good in this environment. And so, at the end of the day, it was my mom's teaching that was like, in my head that was saying, hey, you need to get your GED or something. So I went to Lindsey Hopkins. It's a technical school in Miami, near Overtown as well. So I don't know if you know another Overtown, but that's another neighborhood, Overtown, all other stuff like that. So,
we got someone who lived in Overtown in the comments. He said, I lived in 6 years Overtown, Liberty City. You see?
Yeah, so you know what I'm saying? They know. This is the real Miami. So I'm gonna give it to you. You're lucky to be getting this because not everyone gonna get it like this.
Yeah.
But I went to Hopkins and so took my GED. You know what I'm saying? I aced it. It was nothing for me, you know. So I studied for like a month and then just knocked out the test. Boom! Incidentally, we got rushed and I got arrested. Felony charges. Lawyers say you need to do something before we go to the grudge. And so what I did was registered for Miami-Dade Community College. Okay. Now I wanted to be a rapper, you know, because I'm a better rapper than you are. So at the time, I was like into like making music. I was gonna be like a rap star, you know. Everything was popping right then and there. So I was just like, yeah, you know, drop my music too, you know. And so I had heard of engineers through the music. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, we go to the studio, my boy's mixing it up. And he's like, yeah, that's the engineer. So that's the first time I really started thinking engineer. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm going to go to college and learn how to be an engineer. I want to be a music engineer. I went to Wolfson campus, and when I got there, it's downtown Miami, also in Overtown, essentially, but this part is downtown. And so I went to Wolfson campus, like, I want to, you know, register and study engineering, music engineering. Lady was like, we don't have music engineering over here, you know? And Wilson was close. That campus was close to us because it would just be like a bus ride up the road, right? And so the other campus that had engineering was like all the way on the other side of town. So I couldn't do that. So I was like, all right, you got engineering, whatever. What kind of engineering you have? So she started breaking it down to me, you know, the different engineering types. And so she started talking about civil engineering. And so she described it. And, you know, she said, you know, what it's all about, roads and bridges and highways and things of that nature. And then, you know, that piqued my interest because I was always in my head, like, you gotta always think. I was always thinking, hey, like, how did all this stuff come to be? You know what I'm saying? We were born in it, but some people you gotta understand the history of America and how these things came to be, you know. And so this place wasn't like this in the 1600s, right? And so, you know, obviously, industrial revolution, all this stuff happened, but it was a wilderness. So I was always wondering, you know, how did all of this infrastructure, how did all these structures came to be? And to me, civil engineering answered that question. Studying that would answer that question for me. So, okay, be a civil engineer. That's what I'll study. And then went to court. I got 18 months probation. Still got the felony charge, that's what they was after at the end of the day, you know. And I got lucky because during my time, you know, that's light stuff. You know, my boys were singing like 5-10 years, you know, for bad things, you know what I'm saying, and more. You know, some of them 20 years, you know. So I was able to. That was the time when stuff was getting serious, and I was able to get out of that. So went to court, like I said, we got that situation. Now I'm on probation, you know. Now I can't go to the Mingy house so much, right? Because you're on probation. And so from there, basically, long story short, I did excellent in school. You know, everything just started manifesting. You know, I went from different places. I did get a little bit more trouble. Well, I didn't get any trouble. I was at the Bingy house again, got arrested again. You know what I'm saying? Because the place was hot. You know what I mean? But they dropped the charges on that. But all of this is still, you know, still following me here. You know, 30-something years later, it still follows me. And so, you know, I did excellent. And there's a sisterin, that's a Rastafari sisterin, that worked in the president's office, I believe, at Wolfson. Her name is Malu Harrison. And so I think she's like a big president now. So I don't know if she see this, you know, so big up Malu and stuff, enough respect, enough love. You know, she was the wife of one of my good brethren at the Bingy house named Solomon, also from Yard, from JA, who has a story in and of himself. But you know, Malu was telling me about, she bought like this thing to me about Howard, you know, and she was like, hey, there's this summer program or whatever have you, you know. So I used to see her at school, talk to her or whatever. And so she was like, yeah, that's this summer program. And, you know, I want you to check it out. So long story short, I got it. I, you know, got qualified for the program. I did, like I said, I did great. I did so well that they was writing up like news articles and stuff like that. So I was featured in the paper and all this other stuff, kind of like a turnaround story. And I just was making good grades, and so I got into the program at Howard called Bridges to the Future, and
Okay.
then that's how I got the HU. That was my first HU experience over the summer. I think it was like 93 or something like that.
Okay.
Or something like that by that time, you know. But so yeah, so I got Howard, had that some experience, loved it. And then from there, you know, I went and started applying for other schools and got accepted to these other schools. And I applied for Howard, but Howard came up with the scholarship. So they came up with a scholarship, you know, and it was a full ride engineering scholarship.
Okay.
And, you know, that's why it's a lot of things that I'm grateful for. And I know that there's a lot of opportunity, you know, but you have to apply yourself, you know. And this scholarship, by the way, because I have to mention this, because just to be, you know, straight up, the scholarship was sponsored by the U.S. Navy. Okay, it was one of those programs, you know. It's all our money anyway, but this came from the Navy, and it was specifically for individuals that would go from transferring from a community college or something like that. So it would target inner city neighborhoods where you transfer, and then you can go to the university level. They want you to do research, and they want you to go to graduate school. That was all part of the scholarship program. And yeah, so I got that full ride, and you know, basically from there, that's when I had the pleasure of attending Howard University and everything that came with it.
What was that Howard experience like? What was the first time you met Rastafari in DC? You know, what was that experience like?
I mean, it was great, you know. So the first time I was, I don't know, it was kind of weird because it was like I wasn't looking for it. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't like looking for Rastafari people when I got here, because I had already been into the Rastafari way of life. I was already fully ingrained in it. You know what I'm saying? So our inauguration, I'm coming to Howard. I'm under rehab. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to, you know, see what's going on with this school stuff. And so for me, it was just like, you know, I wasn't just around the Bingy house at that time. So I'm like around a lot of brethren and sisters. This is the first time that I've ever been around young Black people who all wanted to learn and do something positive. So Howard was like, you know, a mirage, if you will. Like, you know, it's like a big fantasy. Stuff that you see on TV about, you know, like what do you call it?
Different world.
Yeah, different world, right? So, and you know, going in that environment and being wide open too. The other thing is like, you know, Howard was just, for a person like me coming from little Haiti, and there was beautiful women all over the place. I'm just going to be honest with you.
I tell people I'm a recovering gallus, because when you reach Howard campus as a young man,
yeah, you know, so I couldn't believe it. It was just, for me, it was just like, what? They're going to put me in a dorm. They're going to give me money to go to school. They're going to set everything up for me. And give me all of these beautiful women around me at the same time. Like, I could never, I'm gonna be honest with you, this is part of the thing that's gonna be revealed, but I could never really want to go to school unless there was like a pretty girl around that I wanted to talk to in the class or something, you know? Like, I would never really want to go. But then, so yeah, I went to school, I went to class all the time, because it was just a great, but then I started learning more, you know what I'm saying? I started learning more about physics and all this other stuff. And I had a professor, Dr. Gardner, Alexander B. Gardner, rest in peace to him. He was a great physics professor. He's in the the history of physics, and he's like no joke thing, So Dr. Gardner and I had the same birthday, and that made us click even more. So he became my surrogate grandfather, if you will, at Howard. So like I said, I really wasn't looking for Rastafari or anything like that. I was already every day I would reason with my brethren them down there or whatever have you. They, reason with I and I like, yo, coach, what's going on and all this other stuff. And there was stuff they supported me because I didn't have any support, financial support. Even though I had a scholarship, the scholarship wouldn't let us work, right? Like it was a scholarship, but all it did was pay for books, tuition, and class, which is great, and we respect that. But they didn't want us to do any real work, so I couldn't go and get a job. And so my brethren used to help support me, and my mom's, and a little bit here and a little bit there. And then I used to live off of loans, you know what I'm saying? So it was just so happened to be like one of my sisters who I was dealing with at that time. I think she had known Sheum or somebody, and she was just telling me, because I used to always, now when I went to Howard, let me tell you, go ahead.
No, I was just telling the people if they know Aya Gif, when he's talking about Rashayun, the world knows him as Aya Gif, you know what I mean? So there's a whole massive of us that was at Howard, Rastafari, young adults, you know what I mean? Bingy Sean was in the comments earlier. I don't know if he's still here. Big up Bingy Sean. Tuning in from Ghana. I know it's way up in the north.
There you go.
I would see that the HU, that was the Howard slang. But all of us were forged in this. I mean, it's almost irrepeatable. I don't think that could ever be repeated again. It was just all these youths, Rastafari, converging on the campus at that time. It's when I look back at it, it marvels, especially when you see what Howard is today and these campuses are today. You wouldn't see one Ras, much less, there was probably at least 20 of I and I, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a portion, but continue.
And the beautiful thing is, like, a lot of the original elders of the Nyabingi tribe was there. It was living, you know what I'm saying? And they were holding down the fort. So we were really, like, benefiting from their trials and tribulations, It was like they had went through all these trials and tribulations in the 60s and 70s, and it was like a breakthrough, by the time, we got there. So we were benefiting off of that. And so, yeah, my sister, and I used to be a Howard. I used to have his Massey button on me all the time. You know what I mean? So it was no secret, And so, well, my sister was like, yo, there's this group of Rastafari people, brethren, or, young bloods. And she was telling me about them. And she was like, oh, yeah, they seem like fish out of water and all this other stuff. She was like, you got to meet them. And so, for me, I was like, okay. But like I had already known Biggie, so I was like, let me see what you're talking about, because you say Rasta. And to me, like, we were so hardcore where we only believed certain group of people was like the Rastafari, you know what I mean? Like true Rastafari, because I'm not Bingy at that time still. And so, so I think it was Shayum or whatever have you, and Stardom, she was talking about Stardom, and then some other brethren, and so, once there was this Shayum, so Shayum used to say Ty and I, like, we used to talk, and so Shayum raps and all that stuff. I don't know if he still does,
He does, he still does. I give myself.
So he was, we had a couple ciphers, you know what I'm saying? And so he was like, yeah, there's going to be one of these elders coming to town or whatever have you. And so it so happened in this case, it was Ross Bonagees, So I had already knew about Bungo Watu from before, in Miami. And so I was like, okay, now you're talking. Now you have my attention because I know that's a real Naya Bingi Rastafari brethren right there. Like you guys, you know who you got there. That's an angel. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Black ancients, you know what I'm saying? So he had invited I and I to go and sit down and the reason with the Rastafari brethren in the area of Bungo Watu. And then from that time, you know, we did that. And then so I started seeing more and more. And then that's basically, you know, we all just meshed in together.
I came and met these brethren at the Bingels. You know, I was a ballhead when these brethren were trotting up, you know, so I missed the early part of those gatherings. Because I came to Howard in 96. When did I start?
95, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
95.
so before.
So just 1 year before you,
I used to
you
see the
know.
brethren on campus. I used to see the brethren on campus, you know, because at that time they didn't have too many ones with locks. At that time,
Okay.
they used to wear cornrow. Remember back in the day,
Yeah,
even
Allen Iverson era.
yeah, exactly. Most of the youth locks is just a recent thing up this side. I think in Miami probably they had more ones with
Nah,
locks.
hey, I'm gonna tell you this though. When we start growing our locks, a lot of people start looking at us like as if we were crazy, you know, and say like you know, what it is. Even my family member, and I can remember telling my family, I say, you see, right now growing locks. I tell you this: the whole one day you're gonna see the whole world gonna have locks on their head. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, so from there it just started manifesting. Like all types of youth start growing their locks down in Miami. All
Yeah,
types, no matter what. And I mean big bongo Congo locks and stuff like
yeah,
that. And these boys could be straight killers. You
yeah.
know, they're not rostered. They're not rostered. They are
No,
killers. I want you to know that.
yeah,
So
no, I see them. I see them.
but they're really like, you know, what I call like, I don't know, sort of like urban maroons, if you will, you know, if you will, some you
Yeah,
know,
because
urban
a lot of
maroons.
them are not in the system. They're completely
No,
outside of the system.
no system for them.
Yeah, some of them don't have ID. You know, they live completely, you know,
No,
cash, cash transactions. You know, they do what they're doing.
any which exactly. So
But let's go forward to the engineering now. You
okay.
graduated, because we're gonna get into the STEM. And I want this is one of the brethren. Any meeting he's at, he's an advocate for STEM. You know, so we're gonna relate it. But I just before we get into the topic, I want to just humanize so that the item know the brethren journey and know the qualification that the brethren have to speak on the topic, so ones can relate. You know, our format over here. We go into the history, then we go into the topic. So, talk to us about, before we do that though, the first time you went to the Naya Bingi house on 10th Street. And do you remember the first time meeting I?
Um, you know, to be honest with you, first time I can't remember when I first met Di, and that's what I think is a beautiful thing. To be honest with Di, you know what I mean? Because it's like Di is already part of the culture. You know what I mean? So it's like you meeting your brothers or whatever have you. Like, do you remember the first time you really met your brother or your sister? You know what I'm saying?
It's true.
No. You know, it's just like that's just you know. So I can't remember like those exact moments and times. I just remember that you know the item you know had started holding up the way of life real strong, you know, at Howard. And so that had gave me an energy. Like I think that's probably my last year or whatever have you. And so the item started holding up the energy real strong. And so I said, well, you know, I'm gonna support that just as well. So it probably was related to something at Howard itself, you know, maybe one of those Howard events you used to have in Blackburn or probably on the yard or something like
We
that.
used to hold court on the yard in them
Yeah.
days, you know, herb a bun. You know what I mean? There might be 50 people around a bench and we reasoning on some geopolitics or
Man,
some Gideon, you know what I mean? The Hebrew Israelites might be there, the Nubians might be there, we might be in a battle. It was
and the Qs might be there, the alphas might be there, the deltas, you know
exactly.
what I'm saying, AKAs and
It
stuff
was
like
it was
that.
just there was a reason in time, you know what I mean? This is pre 9/11.
Yeah,
It was a real vibe at that time. We had a lot of black bookstores. This was before gentrification. We had pyramid books. We had Sankofa was there. You know, it was a real. When I look forward, go ahead.
So I don't know if you know, there's also like a picture of His Majesty when he visited Howard in
Yes,
yeah, you know, in Founders, right?
yes,
And
yes,
so, you know, I could just remember like one of my sisters from Jamaica, you know what I'm saying? She basically run up to me like grabbing me like, yo, Leo, you know, come here, boy. I have to show you something. I was like, what's going on? He's like, just come. You know what I mean? So she took me, dragged me into Founders. It was like, just come, you're gonna like this. And then, you know, she was like, look at that. And all I seen was His Imperial Majesty walking on the yard with, you know. So that basically you know, that was the golden key for mine, if you will, you know. So that sealed it up, you know. I had already, when I came to Howard, I came with my speeches, you know. I got the speeches from my brethren in New York because I had, you know, before I got locked up and all this other stuff like that. I didn't get locked up for a long time, but before I got into trouble, but, you know, I had, you know, the speeches, my brethren, Bongo, you know, Livermore, Guyanese brethren, real rough you. You know what I'm saying? So people from New York, if they listen, then they gonna know what I'm talking about. You know, original New York, Crown Heights, Bingy House, you know, around those areas, you know. And so, and they had taught me a lot about the life. And so they had already given me a lot of stuff. So anyway, so yeah, I was already just like being fed, you know, and then the more I learned about His Majesty and going through these changes, and His Majesty was still there. So could you imagine that I went through all of that? Like, what are the odds, right? You know what I'm saying? To go through all of that in little Haiti and then manifest and come to Howard, you know, and see a picture of His Majesty at Founders, right? So
another thing I want to talk about, because you had to deal with a lot of false teaching, Rastafari teaching, where ones were discouraging education.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that aspect, because a lot of young brethren are going to face the same thing. They may be around people who, you know, look Rastafari, but they're giving them false teaching. But you had the speeches, so you knew it was false. But talk about what was some of that opposition or sounds that I was hearing.
Yeah. Okay. So you know, in the culture, you know, at the time, we had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations, right? So the elders went through a lot of trials and tribulations with the school systems in the Caribbean, you know, and so also my brethren Ross Ibo, who is Ross Ivy's brethren, you know him or whatever.
Ivy's brother.
Yeah, Ivy's brother, Ibo,
Yes,
you know.
yes.
And so you know, Ibo was a good brethren of ours too. So yeah, came to the house. Anyway, he had gone through, you know, certain tribulations over there in the Jamaican school system just as well. And so, you know, a lot of them brethren was taking defensive posture against schools and education, you know, because they were being fought. So naturally they was fighting against it too. They're fighting back. And then, like I said, a lot of that stuff wasn't, you know, in our environment, it wasn't good as far as education. Like the environment wasn't good for education. So I could understand how they end up fighting against it. So there was a saying where they would say education was head education. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, you know, Rastafari have a way of life, a culture where we study word sound and the power that's involved with it. And so education, they would call it head decation, like it's decaying your brains.
Okay.
And so that aspect of it made individuals take it to a certain thing where they applied it to everything. You know, anything that was like from the system, they would say, you know, away, you know, burn that. You know what I mean? So burn books, burn Babylon technology, you know what I mean? Burn Babylon school and stuff like that, Babylon medicine, everything, you know. Some of it is good in terms of overstanding, but when you burn everything, you know, you really don't get a chance to really study it, you know, and see what's the good and what's the bad. You know what I mean? And so there was brethren, not really fighting against cyanide because they love me, you know what I'm saying? I love them too, you know what I'm saying? But they were just fighting against, the idea of thinking, oh, well, you go to certain school or whatever have you, and that's going to change things. I don't know, but they were not encouraging. Some of them was not encouraging me to go to school. They was just saying like, you going to, Babylon school or whatever have you. But my brethren, that was never a Beatty. That's
Yeah.
one thing, they're never Rasa Beatty, you know what I'm saying? And never really anyone who really did any study and deep studying of His Majesty. So some of them said that, but it was out of a cultural thing, and it was just like that's what they would say, just for hanging out. So they just like to burn herb and say these things sometimes, They had some of them good reason because, like, if you go to school and you don't, you're not rooted, you don't have any spirituality, you could come up all twisted, right? So Bob Marley have a saying, a song where he says, where they're graduating thieves and murderers, right? And so that's what happens for real, because you have a lot of people that go to school and they they're sophisticated thieves and murderers.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
You
But
know,
but I wanted to just highlight that part because sometimes youths are being discouraged from getting that education, and you close a lot of doors,
Yeah.
in terms of possibilities for the youth, especially if we don't have an alternative school or education system for them. So I just want to commend the eye for following through and going to Howard despite some naysayers. Talk about now graduation and your journey into engineering and what type of engineering the I practice now.
Okay, so graduated Howard and structural engineering. When I studied civil, I studied mainly structural engineering within civil engineering. So I studied structures, transportation, and geotechnical engineering. And again, because of like reading His Majesty's speeches and the emphasis that he put on science, that made me take it very serious, you know. So it's like I had an opportunity to really, develop yourself into it. Like how they say, don't stare. I think it said, "Don't stare a gift horse in the mouth" or something like that. It's the saying, like So like you don't want to squander your opportunity. And so I knew Howard was giving me an opportunity. I felt like His Majesty had laid it all out there for me and just gave me this road to travel on. And so I did well. You know what I'm saying? It was easy for me and it came natural. So I took structural engineering because it was like hard. The hardest, what I felt was like the hardest thing in civil engineering. So after graduating, I then went to I went to work for a little bit. I went back to Miami for a little bit, and then I came back up here, and then I started working in structural engineering, designing buildings, working for a company called DeLon Hampton and Associates at the time, a black man from Howard, graduate. And so I was working with them and, just doing well. Then I ended up going to grad school, went to George Washington, got my master's in civil structural engineering, civil and environmental engineering, studying structures. But my main thing was to take it very serious, because structural engineering, what we did with buildings and bridges, what we do with buildings and bridges, people lives depend on our work, and so I had to make sure that I knew everything, and also having locks, you going in those environment, you're dealing with people that are very high, high acidity or whatever have you, or they came from different environments, and so they know their stuff too. So I had to prove myself not only as a black man, but as a black man with locks, but to earn my keep. So when I did my work was beautiful and it was right, and so I just got started getting noticed, as like doing good work, and then I end up at that time I was anxious to really get my professional license in engineering, and so like around the nation, you have to wait 4 years after graduation to even apply for your license, because you have to have like 4 years of work experience with most states around the nation before you can even sit for your exam. Okay. But except for California. So California, you only need 2 years. You know what I'm saying? But the catch is, in California, you now have to pass the state specific exams, which involves seismic engineering and their own, other examinations related to surveying and things like that. So it's California state specific examinations. So I was like, yo, I'm gonna do this. You know what I'm saying? So I started studying for the engineering exam after like a couple years of graduation, and I paid for my trip to go out there to Cali, and then I knocked out the exam. and from that time, I got my license, and it was just like, boom, I manifest. And so once I got my license, now what that does is that makes me a higher. It increased my economic value to any company that I work with, right?
Okay.
Because you get your license, and that means that they can charge more for your work, much more for your work. Okay, and I'm on par with all the other people that has been licensed. Like, it don't get any greater. And then I took a Cali exam at that. Okay, so it's a highly respected exam, and so I got the license. And so having my professional engineering license, that changed everything as far as like career opportunities. I started working on all kinds of projects, government projects. I worked on archives. I worked on military projects. I worked on, just recently, National African American Museum project. From there, I got different licenses, different jobs. So bridges, buildings, and highways all along the way. And that, so that's pretty much where it is. And that's what I've been doing since that time. But
why is why is STEM important to Rastafari?
Oh man, now engineering is important. So I'm glad you asked that, because engineering is important to Rastafari. Just for the fact of the matter that it's important for everyone on the earth. Rastafari like to speak about nation development. And so if you want to understand nation development, you're going to have to understand engineering, because, the question, like, I used to also teach. Okay. So I taught at Howard a few times. So I used to ask my students, what is engineering? Can you define engineering? And so, they would come up with answers or whatever have you, but I'm going to do it for the audience right now. So engineering is the practical application of scientific knowledge. So no matter what you might go and you're going to read in all these other definitions, don't worry about it. Engineering is the practical application of scientific knowledge. Okay, so it's not just science for the sake of science. There's people who study, the elements, and they study electricity, they study math, and they study it, and they don't apply it, and which is one of the biggest disconnects that we have in school. Like, at a young age, when you study in chemistry and you study in geometry and stuff, and the kids is like, well, what is this for? Why do I need to know the area of a triangle or a circle or something like that? Why do I need to know the right triangle rule and all this other stuff, and solutions to a quadratic equation, and calculus and all this other stuff? Well, you need to know that if you want to understand certain parts of nature. So engineering is applied science. And so if you're talking about nation building, which Rastafari people talk about all the time, and try to understand, like, if most of us come from countries that are underdeveloped, right? And so we're trying to, see about how do we, go and help and build up the infrastructure, to develop our resources and things of that nature. Well, you have to understand how the lights come on, okay? And that's if you want to understand how the lights come on, you're gonna have to understand engineering, So it's important. Like there is no other way because us as a people, we're kind of late to the party when it comes to this understanding science and technology, and so it's for me. I always feel like there is no other way. So no matter what you do, you're gonna go around in circles. One of my messages as that I know is like, I don't think we're going to go back to like prehistoric times or cavemen, like, I'm saying the dark ages, if you will, I really don't think that's going to come about unless there's a nuclear catastrophe or something like that. And I know even if that's the case, the first thing they're going to do is try to rebuild the same thing. Right. We talk about African development and things of that nature. And so if you want to go home to Africa, you want to do things, well, you're going to have skills to contribute with. Right. And so that's the importance of engineering to the Rastafari faith and the, Black people in general and any other underdeveloped, nations, because it all starts with engineering.
Serious thing. Very, very important if we want to build communities, if we want to build even a proper Nyabingi center, you know what I mean? You need engineers, you need architects, you need people who can translate things from a vision to a physical structure and be confident that the structure is not going to collapse on your head, because that's what engineers do is make sure that these things can be load bearing, you know what I mean? Talk to us about in terms of young Rastafari who's watching this in Zambia or Zimbabwe and they aspire to be an engineer. I already see someone here in the comments asking how can we contact the brother. We're gonna make sure he shares his information or a link, share your email. But what would you say to a young Ras somewhere, anywhere in the world, and they want to become an engineer? What are the things that they need to be thinking about?
Well, first off, you have to take it very serious. Engineering is, again, also like about the study of nature, because what I view as math is a language. That's our language, but it's nature's language. That's when we express ourselves with mathematical equations, we're trying to express a natural phenomenon in a numerical manner, if you will. Okay. And so you have to really be committed. You got to love being a nerd. Okay, so if you want to study engineering or you want to take this thing serious and advance in this field, one thing is to don't be afraid of being extremely intelligent. There are a lot of, unfortunately, in certain neighborhoods in the inner city, it's like, oh, when you start studying and then you start learning things, they be like, oh, you're trying to be white or you're trying to do this or whatever have you, right? So they associate that somehow with white people or Europeans or European culture, And so it's just like, no, it's not that. It's what we're doing. We're studying nature, Look at your resources that are around you, and ask yourself, well, why, how are they developed? How could I develop them? The problem, a lot of the issues that we have, that we complain about as a people is that, other groups of people are coming into our environment and taking advantage of our resources. Well, why do you think they're coming in your environment to take advantage of your resources? That's because you're not doing it. And so, we have to build up a certain system in a way that we are able to do it. It takes capital, You know, we
Yes.
just have a little reason, and it takes capital. Engineering is an extremely capital intensive industry.
Break it down. Break it down for our grassroots people. When you say capital intensive, break it down so the streets can understand what they are talking about.
So capital intensive for the streets perspective is that you need money to make money. You know what I'm saying? So that's how it goes like that. That's the bottom line, you know, because I come from a hustling environment. So you can just, you know, I could have that analogy for you, but I'm just going to try to keep it clean. But you need money to make money, you know, and when it comes to engineering, you need lots of money to make money, you
You're
know.
talking about $1 million budgets, $100,000 budgets.
Yeah, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for the work that we do. So I work on certain projects where the $1 billion projects, you know what I'm saying? And so it just takes a lot of money because of the different things that are involved, especially with this environment. It depends on where you're at. But if you look at the process of, for example, building an electrical, a utility plant, right? Electrical utility plant. We look at Ethiopia. You can see the Renaissance Dam
Renaissance dance.
that they have there, right? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that they have over there. And you know, what that dam does is provide, like, I think over 6 megawatts or so, 6 gigawatts of electricity, which is like the equivalent of about 6 nuclear power plants or so. Okay.
Wow.
So just in and around that, right? But that still only, you know, powers, you know, I don't know the exact number, but it only powers, you could say that might cover like about 30% of the population of Ethiopia, you know? But the fact of the matter is that it takes land resources. It takes enormous amount of material resources. And this is the construction part. Before you even get to construction, okay, there's the whole financial planning aspects of it. There is the you know, myriad of professionals that have to be involved, and you know, government officials that you have to deal with, and you know, it takes a lot. And so what happens is that you have to plan yourself and build up your capital. It's like you're building up a certain amount of energy. Okay, so you're building up a certain amount of potential energy, and that is economic energy in this case. So once they reach like a critical mass of economic energy, then you're ready to let go and do the project. Okay, but when you're doing that project, you can't get stopped because all this stuff is financed through banks, through, you know, the Bank of Americas, through the Goldman Sachs, you know, through all of the large banks of the world, you know, World Banks, IMF, all that stuff, you know, they have their hands in it. But in America, so it's capital intensive. So, you know, the system, the way that it works is that these companies don't have all this money on their in their bank account to pay the payroll and all this other stuff. No, it's bank finance that keeps all this stuff going. Okay. Because engineering just so happen to be in architecture, all that stuff. It's an industry where you can do work in January, but you might not get paid for it until like, you know, March or April, you know, or something like that. So it's a big lag that's between the work, the economic value produced, and then the actual money delivered, right? And then meanwhile, you have to coast. You understand what I'm saying? And so to survive that time period, that gap between value delivered and value paid for, you know, you have to have finances. And so that's why this business is economically intense. Minerals, all right? You know.
So you're saying the big companies, they'll get a bank loan so they can cover all those expenses. So in between that time where they get the money, because you may design the building, but then you have to sell the building to get the capital. But until then, you're going to finance the building with a bank that's going to loan you the money. Then you're going to sell the building, pay back the bank, and then keep going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's all done, off of bank financing. If you look at the current U.S. president Donald Trump, right? That's what he was doing development work, and that's why he had to go bankrupt several times. It's because of the amount of financing that's involved in it. That's not, and it's not. It's just the way that it is, right? So the only other solution is capital intensive. So you're gonna have to come up with the money one way or the other, all right? And
So when
so,
when we talk about Rastafari schools, health centers, this is not a poverty reasoning that we're having. We can't do it on righteousness alone and Bible verses. Is that what they are saying?
yeah, well, I mean, spirituality is key. You know what I mean?
It's the
So
foundation. We know that, but I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
alone. That's why
But
it's
no, not alone. Spiritual and material and iridical progress. His Majesty spoke about that, and he told us that we have to take that as morality.
yes, I.
Progress must be moral, right? And so that it takes serious planning, and it takes financing to make it happen until you could really store up your own capital, your own savings, right? So the money's going to have to come from somewhere at some point in time. And, there are other political systems that, you know, take the money like from the government, like and give it to the people, or they do the work. That's communism. Some of them, they call it that, or, certain things. But they get into a situation where the state collects the money. Okay. But in a so-called, capital or free market environment, it's the individuals that get to collect it to a certain point, and then they put it all in the bank, and the banks then decide, okay, who to lend it to. So we need access to that type of capital in order to do the works that we need to do. You know, um, it's just the way it is. Even if you look at, like I said, I use the dam as an example, but if you look
Yes.
at electricity plant that's by, if you use coal, for example, even though they don't like coal, right? But if you want to go solar or whatever have you. Now, people don't understand how solar panels are made, okay? They just see the panel and they're happy and they be like, oh, yeah, it's environmentally friendly. You see, all we got to do is put up this little sheet right here, this panel. We wire up this thing, boom, bam, we got light, you know what I'm saying? And we got electricity. But that panel right there is made from silicon and phosphorus and all these other things, right? And so there's a whole process of getting this thing silicon pure. The silicon has to be pure. I'm gonna be a nerd because that's who I am, but I'm gonna
That's
let
what
you
we
know.
want here on the Lion Voice. This is liberation time. Come on, give it to us.
Yeah, so the silicon has to be like 99.99999, something like that percent pure. It's basically about a millionth of a percentile pure to be used for solar panels. And to go through that, it's an enormous chemical intensive process. I mean, big plants. All right, so you can look it up online, everybody, because we have that resources, right? And you go in.
China is now the world leader. China is the world leading producer of solar panels.
Yeah, and that's when that. So at the same time, so what happens is, just it's industrialization, and so the only way industrialization makes sense is when it's on a mass scale, a grand scale, So you have to be able to do things on a massive scale in order so that it reaches a certain price point where it could be on everyone's home, right? That's
And
the
let me
same
say that China paid a major price to their environment for their industrialization. China basically did what America did over 100 years. China condensed that industrial process, and they paid a massive price in terms of air pollution, river pollution, and they're now starting to reverse that. They're in the process now of reversing that, cleaning up their factories. At one time you couldn't breathe the air in Beijing or Shanghai. You had to wear a mask. Now the air is, it's like it's Western standards, but they went through that process, as the brethren said, and this is massive government investment in that industry, why they were able to become one. And this is where the private sector, the disadvantage with the private sector leading certain innovation is that the capital that he's talking about, for a billionaire to say, I'm going to invest in something that may not give me a return for 40, 50 years, that's a tough sell for someone to put that capital. This is why governments, and this is why I remember that the government is supposed to represent the people. It's because I'm bringing it back to the principle of collective security as Rastafari. If we want certain things to be done, we're going to have to fund it ourselves as that global governance for Rastafari, and come up with the capital to do certain things. That doesn't mean that we're going to become the number one supplier of solar panel. But if we want to, for example, build a campus, a Rastafari university, a Rastafari school, that's a maybe a $10 million project, you know what I mean? And where do we get this finance from? Are we waiting for a government to feel sorry for us and to grant us that money? That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Is we have to come together and make that happen. And the only way we're going to do that is collective security. We have over 1 million races, $1 each, $10 each. That's 10 million. We got a budget now where we can call in Ras culture and say, this is what we want to do. We can start small. But until we start thinking, and that's why I wanted to bring you on today, is, this channel, we talk about the building of Zion. But I'm not a sky god person, I don't like, I didn't grow up in the church. I don't have that background. I came up in a Pan-African home. I accepted the divinity and the majesty at Howard, in philosophy, even the creator, all of these things. But what attracted me was the practical reality. I could know Ethiopia is there. I can learn about it. I can study His Majesty. I can touch, it makes sense. And if we are going to create the alternative to Babylon, we got to stop thinking about keep a stage show and raise $1,000. And we gotta come off of that scale. We gotta start thinking millions, 10 millions, and I don't want us to be afraid. Big question, I'm gonna put you on the spot now. If I wire $10 billion into your bank account in the morning, what type of project for Rastafari would you fund and put in place? And how would that look from an engineer perspective?
No, I'm dealing with fantasy world, man.
No, this is
But I'll just go mess with you. I'll just mess with you. Electricity, man. I mean, there's two things that everything starts with: infrastructure, and electricity, roads and electricity. Okay, and then I probably start more with roads, but it all comes together because when you build the infrastructure and you build up the road system properly, of course you're gonna need. Like people see roads and they just like, oh, that's just a way to travel right through a paved area or whatever have you, but when it rains, you need, there's stormwater sewers that drain the water away. So there's drainage, like all that stuff needs to be done properly in such a manner that it's a sustainable system. So the infrastructure that's involved with roads, is something that I would want to focus in on, because once you get the roads and you build that up properly, then you're able to transport a lot of the materials. I'll probably say roads and rails, so you're able to transport that properly and build whatever you need to do, because now you have that transportation infrastructure that's required to move from point A, all goods and services from point A to point B effectively. So that would be my main focus, because I know everything from there would continue to grow.
Roads and then a power plant, he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes, it's all together. There's like, like nobody wants to live in a house, right, that doesn't have heat and electricity in it, at least in our environment, certain environment, you can't stand to live like that. And so with certain other places, that's the situation, you know. And they get like in Haiti, you know, because I've been there several times in Haiti and whatever have you. And with the little time when we get light, you know, you gotta take great advantage of that. I don't know if you experienced that over there in Ghana or in Jamaica.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, so that's that period of time. So you have to have it all. And so also, you know, clean running water, right? Simple things like that, what we take for granted, you know, that we're able to have indoor plumbing and, you know, the water meets a certain minimum quality standard or whatever have you. And we can bathe with it, you know, we can wash and do things with it. You know, that's something that is just not a given. Um, and not everybody can have to go down to the stream to do it. You know, because people be like, you know, Rastafari be like, oh yeah, bro, you could just go and have a stream, you know, or you go to the spring or whatever have you. Lovely. Not 10 million people.
That's what I'm saying. Scale it when
right? Like, you know, you can't do it on that massive scale. Africa has billions of people, and our little places where we have tens of millions of people. So that is something that is, you know, it just requires a lot of energy and things like that. So it's all a package deal, is what I'm getting at. And I'm not trying to say, okay, you could recreate like this environment. Because if anything, our advantage of like not having to had developed during the industrial revolution, phase 1 and phase 2, if you will, and now, you know, is that now we have the foresight of hindsight. That's how I like to say it, you know. So you can look into the past. We have the advantage of looking into the past and seeing, you know, what's good and what was negative about their drawbacks, you know, to certain things, like you're saying with China and the way that they have developed, you know, their steel and their coal industry, their electrical industry and all that stuff in coal. The way that they did it, it caused a lot of pollution. And the same thing with America.
America too, yeah.
Same thing
and
with
Europe. There was a time in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, go ahead.
Listen, there's no other way. There's no other way. There's no clean energy. I mean, I'm not trying to be out there like that. But I'm saying it takes there are pluses and minuses to all of it. To get to clean energy, you either going to do it on a small scale, or you're going to have to pay it somewhere else, like the pollution part or the cost issues, if you will. That's how they call it in engineering. They don't say, you know, bad thing. Like they don't say like it's going to be pollution. They just call it a cost. You know what I'm saying? Impacts, environmental impacts. So to get away from these negative environmental impacts and try to mitigate those impacts or whatever have you, you know, it takes other technology that is expensive. Because like coal right now, you know, the problem with coal is the amount of pollutants that it was releasing into the air, mainly like as like sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, you know, and different sulfates and things like that, which are like precursors for acid rain and things, you know. So they have systems that can scrub that out. You understand what I'm saying? But to get the scrub, you need certain metals and certain elements, certain things like platinum. You know, it's like even in your car, right? Like when we had carburetors, and I think they still do. You know, a lot of these cars have platinum in it in the muffler. You know what I'm saying? And so, and that's to filter out the pollution. And so, to get the platinum to get to that level, it's going to take even more work. So it all have to come together. There's not going to be no easy road to success or where you could do this on a large scale. And that's the challenge that we face, and you know, overstanding that challenge and start to say, okay, how we address this and how do we mitigate the impacts to the environment while developing our nation. You know, that's the challenge.
I think, you know, Rastafari, we believe in the ancient future. You know, I first heard that term coming into Rastafari And that's how we have to think. How do we preserve the foundational parts of our agency, but we want some futuristic accommodations. You know what I mean? We don't want, as I say, to be living in a hut with a floor that's ground. We may want to have some grounding spaces in the home. You know what I mean? But we want to have the hardwood floor, the this, the that, the nice amenities. You know what I mean, and all of those things. But we want to do it in a way that's in harmony as much as possible with nature. But as the brethren say, there are trade-offs because, yes, I mean, even at Kwasi in Ghana, we have a 40,000 watts of solar power. But as the brethren say, the manufacturing of those solar power panels in China is not completely clean energy. You know what I mean? There's pollutants being created. But do you think that mankind, this is something that I meditate on, because I think that with our brilliance, and this is part of our divinity, that we can solve a lot of the problems that we have created if the focus was there, if we weren't spending hundreds of billions of dollars on war and frivolous, money laundering, we could be coming up with solutions. I saw, like we have the plastic patch in the ocean. There's like miles of waste in the ocean just floating. We have, these landfills that could be mined for, how do you see the repair? Is that something that engineers could put together a repair plan if they had the capital?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of engineering in this case, if you will. Is that it's a man-made problem, and it could be a man-made solution too. To that problem. One thing is that I always feel like what Rastafari taught me is like taught me about the earth and understanding how the earth works. Within an iridical basis. So I always feel like the earth will destroy us before we destroy the earth. Okay. So that's why you have to, we have to pay attention to this. And so, that we would do certain things and then the earth is rumbling because of that. You know what I'm saying? So now you start getting, certain storms or whatever have you, and then all types of bad things happen. I could go into it, but it's just like the earth will destroy the people before the people destroy the earth. That's a fact. And we have to address it in terms of environmental sustainability, but we also have to deal with our challenges, our energy needs. You know what I'm saying? Because people have energy needs, and the solution isn't like what some people be like, yeah, well, we could have less people on Earth. No. Like, what I'm saying? Nobody's volunteering to go and commit, like, what I mean? That's not a solution, right? So the solution is to use our resources more effectively, so more efficient use of resources, more sharing of resources and technology, technical know-how. That's one thing that I also want to speak to is that, it's not, we can't just be go into isolation as a people. Like think, oh well, we got to do this ourselves as just like Africa, black people or whatever have. We don't need to use European technology, or we don't need to. But there is no such thing really to me about European technology or European math or science. That doesn't make any sense, So to me, it's just like it's nature. It's it's science. It's objective, right? So you would just have to see it and how to apply it, right? And so, my only thing is to try to be sustainable, but also to try to meet our needs. It's just something that has to be done on a large scale. But the idea of just saying, oh, you got to shun technology out of the equation, or it's not going to be a little bit of pain along the way for us to come up. That may not be the case. We might have to have some pain, but we just, have to try to do this thing in an effective way. And like I said, that's what other people have done. So for me, it's like this, the Europeans and other groups, they have already industrialized and they've done their pollution. And now they come and tell Africa, oh no, you can't use this technology. It's polluting the earth that they've already polluted. So they don't want to pollute. They don't want you to add to what they have already done to get to this point where they could tell you what to do. You understand what I'm saying? So it's just like, listen, there's certain parts where we just have to bite the bullet and we have to come up to a certain level. I'm not saying pollute everything, but I'm just saying like it's a mix of technology. So we can't just say, okay, we're going to do all solar, like, fire burn coal plants. No, we got to use coal. We might have to use nuclear energy just as well, and figure out how to deal with that. But the beauty of engineering is that as it evolves, right now we're sort of into this so-called artificial intelligence and robotics, and it's only going to get, um, better, if you will.
More advanced, exactly. We're in the early days. That's what people don't realize about AI. We're in the early days of AI. When I met the AI culture, we were using pagers. You remember that?
Yeah.
You understand? There was no smartphone. There was no seeing nobody face on no device. That was not even a thought. That was Star Trek.
Man, come on, like I said, the whole story, like I said in the beginning, we started with brick phones, big giant phones, right?
And if you had that, that was rare. That was rare to see somebody with a mobile phone or a car phone.
Right.
You was
And they
really
look at
like
you
at a high level.
like you're a superstar for having that or something like James Bond. Like, what do you do with that brick phone? But that's the whole thing. Like, it's going to get prevalent and it gets more and more prevalent. So robotics is going to develop, voice command, we're in that environment right now where you're just talking to Gemini or Chat GPT or whatever have you. And these things are just recording and taking in data. So this stuff is going to be developed and it's going to be used for science and technology more and more just as well. So I do feel like, all is not lost.
And for the first time, this the gap between the spiritual, the mystical, and the scientific is becoming smaller. Because when you start getting into quantum physics, you start getting into, molecular sciences and there's a company that just announced they brought back the dire wolf. They're looking at de-extinction, bringing back the woolly mammoth. You can do mutations, mixing different animals. I mean, the things that they can do right now genetically, and with the drone technology that we're seeing, the UFO, all these UFO sightings, a lot of them are experimental government drones that are using different propulsion systems. I mean, again, I say this because when I started at Howard, like I said, the iPad was something you saw in Star Trek. Star Trek Next Generation. They, remember they come by and they have the pad and all of that. They was doing that was not something that was real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just within this short span of time, and I got my sister Rashida, Lion Pride on Patreon. She was with us at Howard. In those days, she said we are at the early stages of AI. However, the government is not. They are years ahead of the average. Exactly. By the time we get Chat GPT, that's an old
thing.
That's an old, that's an antiquated system. You know what I mean? By the time we get these technologies to the public. Remember, what was that Will Smith movie about Enemy of the State? Do I remember that movie?
Yeah, a little bit.
What about the government surveillance and the satellites? And, they got satellites that can read your license plate. That's old time. They got satellites that can read your mail, right now.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing that, when by the time it's released to the average population, for public use, if you will, public consumption, the government has already mastered that. Okay. And so you're getting a portion of it. They've already scrubbed it and see what they could have around and release it. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is that it comes once it gets released, it takes on another life within itself, within the public,
Exactly.
and start developing and going in different ways.
We have a
So,
question here for the eye. Can the brethren speak on material engineering, creating new materials to be used in various fields?
yeah. So absolutely. Material engineering is also again one part of civil engineering, just as well as and chemical engineering. So it is a very interesting field. This is one area of like where it get very technical science. That's why I say you can't be afraid to be a true nerd, if you will, or an extremely intelligent individual. And I'm not talking be a geek, okay? I'm talking be intelligent, be a nerd, and understand what it is. So when you start to get into material engineering, you're going to have to learn a lot of chemistry because it's all about molecular bonding, right? And it goes to that level. And then, from there, obviously you're doing it because you could make anything from like super strong steel to very flexible, spandex type of material. You understand what I'm saying? And it has all types of uses. So that's the other thing. We talk about material engineering, like it's all over us. We don't know it. It's such that it permeates our environment so much that we're desensitized to it. Okay. That's why you see a lot of stuff like California. You read this label and says something about California proposition such and such says they could cause cancer, and it's like, geez, what? It's like everything I pick up has the same label on it, because there's just like a lot of engineering that goes into the environment that we serve, that we're in, and so all of these things, the foam, plastics, all that stuff like that, it's not possible without a deep understanding of material engineering. So it's a great field to be in. There are huge companies that's already established that does those things. Us as a people, we would have to be at that level.
Yes.
Again, that's why I talk about
or we'll be swallowed by it. If we don't get up to speed, we will be at the mercy because it's not stopping. There's no, and we also have to say that development is not linear. So just because it took 10 years to get from, a pager to a smartphone doesn't mean that it's going to take 10 years to do the equivalent development with AI and supercomputing. Knowledge is now expanding exponentially. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So
and what that means exponentially, let me see if you give you a little engineering quiz, hip hop quiz, What you mean by exponential? You know what a graph of an exponential function looks like, right?
What's that?
It takes off really fast, So it just in a short period of time is a high slope to it, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
So, it grows at an extremely high rate. And so that's the main thing, that it continues to grow. And so, but the thing about it is too, there's no guarantee from one generation to the other.
Yes.
This is the funny part, if you will, strange, like a dichotomy type of thing, with engineering. It's not genetic per se. You can't pass this knowledge on to the next generation. The next generation has to learn it, has to grow, and they have to have experience it, and then they can, benefit off of what the previous generation has created. But it's a continuum where basically it's not something that is people might be like, oh, like for example, there's a stereotype where like you see a Chinese kid in your class and you say, oh, well, that person's going to be smart in math. No, just because they're Chinese doesn't make them smart in math, and so it's not something that automatically translates. You have to put in the work, and that's what happens. Like it could get lost from one generation to the other. And this is a challenge that we face within America and all the other developing nations, and particularly like with our race. It's like we have a certain group of people who know our stuff, right? We're technologically advanced, but then the next crop of youth coming up, you know what I mean? If they are not studying and they don't have that opportunity to develop their skills, we're going to lose the momentum.
And China does the best job of this. You know, China's graduating more engineers than America graduates in all fields every year. I think what we have to do is to create that cultural framework, because one of the big things that came out recently is when the people started looking at Chinese TikTok, and you know, they had like math problems and different things, and you know, our TikTok in America is all dancing and, you know, jollification. Chinese TikTok, they're doing equations, and you know, they engineer their TikTok so that people go into STEM. You know what I mean? They are thing. Our black culture right now is very toxic. You know what I mean? We're not setting the cultural environment for our youths to be curious even about engineering. They want to be a rapper. They want to be a scammer. They want to, you know, they want to get fast money. That's what's attracting the youth, and that's what we're pushing with, you know, because the mainstream, you know, the record labels, the corporate media is pushing criminality on our young black stripper culture. They're pushing all of these things on our youth, whereas when you look at the global south, China, Singapore, all of these, especially in Asia, they are preparing their youths for STEM. You know what I mean? For the AI revolution, for this, that. They are making sure. India, all of these countries are really, you know, and that's why it's important to travel too, because a lot of people think, you know, America's actually slipping in the standard. When you go to some place, if you go to like Dubai, Qatar, certain places, and you see the infrastructure projects that they're doing, the buildings they're building in Asia and China, and some of the architectural wonders, the dams. I mean, this thing looks like Futurama is here already. You know what I mean? And, you know, we see in America, we have decaying infrastructure. We got, you know, I want everyone to Google high-speed rail right now. You have some trains right now that move so fast, and when you're in these trains, you can have a penny balancing on a cup, and the penny don't move. You know what I mean? Because it's so stabilized. And the thing, you know,
they got train that travel by magnetic levitation.
Magnetic levitation. You know what I mean? Right now, as we speak, and this is built by engineers. So this, you know, alternative to Babylon that we want to build, we need brethren like Ras culture. We need to be pushing our youths them into the engineering fields. Tell the people, what are the other types? There is a civil engineer. What are the other types of engineering as well? And just give us a brief.
I'm a civil structural engineer. I'm mainly structures, so I do buildings and bridges and stuff like that. You know, but within civil engineering, I'm going to start with the best and then talk about the rest. Right? So within civil engineering, you know, there's structural, as I said, buildings and bridges and things like that, tunnels, and then there's transportation. All those guys do is focus on roads. There's traffic engineering. That's also part of transportation engineering. There is what do you call it? Water resources engineering within civil engineering. There's wastewater, sewer, like sanitary engineering.
Mama Thea was on this program.
Yeah, exactly. She works.
An ex Howard alum who works for the DC Water Commission. Big job too. I'm not talking about entry level. You got to go through Mama Thea if you want some things done in the city. She just got a promotion.
And I believe her undergrad was in Kimmy, you know, so she's
chemical. You know? Sister Sania, remember Sister Sania? chemical.
Salem at one time wanted to study something like that. I
Yes,
don't
yeah,
know.
he was gonna do mechanical at one time, I think. Oh
Yeah.
no, I think it was chemical. I think it was chemical.
Yeah, it was Kimmy. I remember. I
Yeah,
think that's how I met him.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's civil engineering. There's, of course, there's civil engineering. They call it civil engineering, but it's like stormwater. It deals with, everything, all these underground utilities that we have in there. There's a whole city that below our feet all the time. So we have water pipes, sewer pipes, telecommunication lines, electrical lines, all that stuff. Civil engineers deal with, and of course, the drainage and so all that. So that's civil. And then, the next up, I'm kind of going to go by development as far as historical development. You could probably say it's mechanical engineering, and then mechanical engineering. I mean, come on, it's just too much to talk about, but it's just like everything that deals with machines, so from cars to, rocket ships, if you will, to HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration. That's all under the belt of mechanical engineering. And then, so if I wasn't a civil engineer, and I'm like a I'm like an aspiring mechanical engineer too. So I try to be a mechanical engineer sometime because that's like our cousin. And so mechanical engineer is the other field. And then,
Ross Michael, remember Ross Michael?
yeah, mechanical. He's a big time. That's another thing. Like at Howard, like the top people who used to give me competition, who I used to consider real comp, were all from like Jamaica or Africa. You know what I'm saying? Because that was like my real competition. Because I ain't had to worry about certain other group of people. But if I had to worry about some kid over there messing up the curve, it would be a Jamaican or some African. So I had to study extra hard to be up on their level. And so I had a lot of brethren and sisters in them, and Michael is like one of them. He's
And that's another Howard University Ras coming out of injured. I'm just trying to show the people,
yeah. We super deep, man.
Yeah.
We super deep, and you got Ross Boo. We can't forget. We can't have this session right here.
As an elder working on massive Woodrow Wilson Bridge. What I mean? We're talking some massive projects these brethren work on,
All right, so let me finish. Yeah. So, and then electrical, you have electrical, right? Electrical engineering. We just spoke about a lot of the power plants and utilities, but that's also just a small portion. Well, it's a big portion of what they do, but electrical, everything from the lights in your house to, power plants and then some, and electrical systems. So they're all over the place, electrical, electronics, so it kind of goes in together. So electrical engineering is another huge, intensive field of engineering. And then you have chemical engineering. And so that is that's everything that we have to deal with. That's responsible for a lot of the materials that we use. Brethren just was reading someone talking about material engineering. Chemical engineer is part of it, but that's everything. It's not just easy to clean the water. You have to know You have to know which chemicals to use to treat water, whether you're going to consume it or release it into the waterways. You have to know about that, and it's everything. It's just simple things like lotion that you might use. Somebody might use lotion and not know what type of chemicals in it. So we dealt with COVID just recently, and we had to use a lot of sanitizer and things like that. These things don't come about just so, right? It takes certain technical knowledge to understand how to fight that and combat. So chemical engineering, and they by the way make the most money. So if people want to know, also like somebody young engineering say, okay, I want to make bread when I graduate. What do I study first? If I want to get out of college, if I want to get just 4 years and then go to start making money, chemical. Okay, that it's hard though. Okay, but it's chemical engineering. They make the most, and then after that would come electrical, probably, and mechanical. Civil engineers, they don't treat us right until we get like 20 years of experience, you know, and then we start making a little bit of bread. But yeah, let me see. And there's environmental engineering, of course. You know, that's what we had to study, and we mainly deal with cleaning up the environment. Um, and dealing with pollution, whether it's air pollution or water pollution or soil pollution. So all types of different things that you can get in with environmental engineering. But
That's
it's
a
all
key
about,
one.
yeah, it's all about you know, trying to mitigate the impact, the negative impacts that our environment has to sustain from our work, from our needs. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. Like, and if I had it my way, to be honest with you, I would study all. You know, I'm into all of it. Um, but it's just like ultimately you have to focus in on something. But as a nation, there is no development that would not. There's no nation that can develop itself without all of those fields, each and every last one of them. And that's just the science part. That's just the engineering part. I'm not talking about, you know, bioengineering and, you know, all the other things that are just like byproducts of engineering. So there's a whole lot that's required. For me, after all of these years, what I see as important is having technical skills, because there are a lot of people that go to school and they have all these big degrees, but you know, they can't even build a little doghouse or something, you know, or they can't mix a bag of cement. You know what I mean? They can't mix a bag of you know, ready creek. You know, so you have to have some technical skills. A lot of our youths that are falling victim to crimes in the street, you know, either doing crimes or being a part of it because they're so infatuated with the music scene and stuff like that. It's because those youths don't have, you know, jobs that can pay them well. You know, in my view, that was a big thing for us. You know, getting jobs that can pay well. I mean, nobody wants to have to work at a fast food restaurant and you work for 2 weeks and you wait another 2 weeks to get your check, and then that's still $100.
That's real. That's real. We're gonna seal up. We're over the 2 hour mark.
That,
but I want you to answer this final question. How do you see the potential of 3D printing for inventors? 3D printing is an interesting one too. That
yeah.
was also Star Trek.
Yeah, I had limited experience with 3D printing, but I see the potential in it. My experience has been with you know, certain models that, you know, certain projects we're working on. They use a 3D printer to kind of to print out a prototype of that building or whatever have you. But yeah, 3D printing, I am definitely into it in terms of like I see it as a promising field. I don't know how much it can do, but it's like one of those areas that until I start studying it, I don't realize how powerful it is, you know, or already has become, right, in development. So a lot of what I have to deal with is like something called CMC, you know, which is like computer programming and and fabricating at the same time, you know. So the robots do all the fabrication work, you know.
Okay.
And so, you know, people are trying to talk about printing, you know, they get into their minds where, you know, they want to print a whole building. I don't think the technology is there yet. It's not going to replace, you know, the work that is normally done to create a building. So, but I think in terms of components and certain unique parts, yeah, 3D printing is awesome. You know,
It's the future, and again, we're in the early phases of these technologies, so it's going to continue to evolve. You're going to have you know, I remember in Star Trek they had the thing that could molecularly print things. You know, you'd go and you want food and it would just create it from molecules. You know, we used to think that was fantastical, but where they're going now, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see these things. Um,
I would be.
I would be too. I'm just saying. But that's what I'm saying, that we gotta take our minds out of the box. I'm gonna read some of these comments and then we gotta seal up. Ella Maroon, Lion Pride, love the content as always from Bahrain. So
Yes, sir.
anybody who think this platform is local, I want you to just read what Ella Maroon is telling you. He's in Bahrain checking out the Lion Voice, and we have a big following in the Middle East as well. I get enough Arabic messaging, you know what I mean? Freeway Dread, Lion Pride checking in, one of our brethren who's on the road driving. Never leave us alone, Lion Pride on Patreon. Big up yourself. Black
Yes.
Palace Music, bless up yourself. Nux Lion Pride Patreon checking in. Lich
Yes.
Safari, bless up yourself. My good Sister Hayden, which is Sister Rashida, checking in. She never leave us alone.
That's
From how
beautiful, man.
What's that?
That's beautiful. You know, I'm loving your following, man. You know, I
No,
love it, man.
we're building a community online. You know, that's our thing here, is how we can build a community. Empress Felipa, greetings family, more love and blessing coming from the Bahamas. Naya Bingi family,
Yeah.
big up Lion Voice. And that's the thing. You know, we could take the easy route out, go commercial, but I wanted to build a platform to feed the root of Rastafari. Because if we don't water the roots, if we don't tend to the roots, then this thing is going to water down and mash up. And we need a space. You know, where online are you going to hear from a Rastafari certified engineer give you 2 hours of content talking about STEM and Rastafari? So, for ones who see the vision, I give thanks. You see that we're coming with a different thing. We're not following the crowd or the trends. We are busy about the business of building a new reality and reshaping the movement, you know what I mean, in terms of
Yes, sir.
reorienting it forward to where His Majesty speeches showed us to go, you know, because we're not reinventing the wheel. His Majesty spoke on engineering, you know what I mean? His
Yes, sir.
Majesty
I
deployed.
say, Majesty is the chief engineer. He's the grand chief engineer of
Engineer.
Ethiopia, of Ethiopian development. You know, so
So
that's one thing that His Majesty always did, was to focus on making sure that the Ethiopian nation would develop under him in a technological manner.
exactly. And the Renaissance Dam, all these things were conceived from His Majesty time. You know what I mean? This nothing new. The war, that was one of the reasons why the Italians invaded, was to stop the progress, the rapid development. And I always tell people this, and we can end on this note, is that um, imagine His Majesty was unopposed in his reforms, in his projects and his development, how much progress would have been made. You know,
Serious.
just imagine, you know, if you want to know a man's heart, look what they do with their time, how they spend their time, what their legacy, and just think he did that in the face of massive opposition. One of the things, the statistics that always touch my heart, is Massey said that after the war, he only had $5 million in the treasury for Ethiopia. You know what that is for, to build a nation, and
That's
then
crazy. That's
to
amazing.
to multiply that to where Ethiopia was in the 50s and the 60s. You know what I mean? So just to show you how great Kadamawi, and this is practical. This is, he has to hire engineers. He has to work with architects. You know what I mean? So when we think about levels, you know what I mean? Most people can't even run their own house, much less build a nation. So this is, that to me, that's more miraculous than somebody coming from the sky and shooting lightning bolts from their eyeballs. You know what I mean? Because yeah, that's amazing. But then when payroll and you gotta pay the people
You know
and
what I'm
you gotta
saying?
thing runs, you know what I mean? That to me
Serious
is
thing.
serious. You know what I mean? So we have to heal the living, the true and living. So give us some final words on Ras Culture, some words of inspiration to the Rastafari family on just the I mission and STEM, and then let the people know what you're working on, how they can reach the I if they want to reach the I, or if you have anything that you want to share.
Well, I'm going to say, as far as contacting I, first and foremost, contact I through the brethren. The brethren have my direct link. It's the best way to probably get in contact with I. But once you're able to contact Ross Kwasi, the network. So from there, you're going to get me easy. All right, because anywhere I am in the world, Ross Kwasi is going to know how to get in touch with me some way, somehow. He knows the connection. But my email, if someone wanted to email me, again, I think it's going to go through Ross Kwasi, but, I could give you email information just as well, So just let me know what's up. I would say this, for the youth, them, mainly it's like to think about the future, to think about the future and watch who you associate around with. There's a saying like, if you see a person friends, you might see their future. So you have to be careful who you associate around. And if you're serious about this thing, don't feel no way in terms of just saying, hey, I don't care who it is. I know I'm doing the right thing. Just put your head in the book. Put your head down and do the work. It takes that. It was a lot of times where we could have gone partying, Sometimes I said no, and I didn't go partying. Even at Howard, I'm saying? There's a lot of times where I could have just went to parties and have fun, but I had to make the grade. I wanted to continue to perform. And so that's the thing, is that you have to focus on your studies. You have to take this serious. Science is not a joke. It's not a plaything, and so engineering is like that. And if you take that attitude, also with the ironical heart, with the spiritual heart, you're going to do well. But you have to be very serious about your work. So that's the one message I would want to share, with the youth. As far as the people, everyone else, the adults, like Rastafari, I say industrialization is a must. Just like we have a saying that says repatriation is a must, industrialization is a must. That's going to go hand in hand. So we have to develop our nice self. And Africa is going to move on with or without us. So we might as well get on the train, and try to be part of the development. There are no guarantees. Like I said, the stuff is just not, it doesn't do, the work can't do itself. So there are no guarantees for success or progress because we have resources. But one thing is guaranteed, that somebody's going to try to get those resources, So we might as well be the one to develop it. So that's my message to the brethren and sistren. And, I give thanks for everything, Fire.
Give thanks for the I. And we're going to bring the I forward because there's a lot of things that we didn't touch on. But this is just like engineering 101 tonight, 101. But I want to do some panels on STEM. I want to have a ongoing focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics because, again, we want to shape a different view of Rastafari. I get a lot of ones that reach out to I and say how this channel has been impacting them, how they're learning so much more. So I feel a responsibility to really help shape. At Howard Law School, we learned that a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. So I'm also a social engineer. So we have to engineer a culture that can stand the test of time, and doing that, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, family. That's the thing I want to just make clear. The teachings of His Majesty is why you can see the brethren, a lot of the other names that we called, the ones who are doing well right now, who are prospering in the liberty, are the ones who really didn't really follow people, but they followed the king. They formed their own relationship with the Majesty and the selected speeches. And all of those things are there. You can't be strayed if you stay connected to the source. And that's one of the things I really want to emphasize to young Rastafari, because there's a lot of messages in the culture. Even Brethren said people were burning education and Babylon schools and all of that. You will hear so much noise, but unless you have that connection to the source to know what your purpose is, you know what I mean? When I started this platform, people were saying the Ras is just trying to make money, and you know what I mean, all these things. I wasn't firm in my living and had battlefield experience. I could let that discourage I, or I could say, you know what, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to try to monetize it, and then it's not sustainable. You know what I mean? So you can't listen to the noise, because those people who are telling you that not going to do it themselves either. That's the thing that I had to learn. The critics, who are these fire people who burn out everything, you will wait 20 years and look, and they haven't built one thing. They're the same place. The Virgin laugh, because it's true. They're in the same place that you left them 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Because you cannot let other people, if you are called to do a work, you cannot let that doesn't mean that you ignore constructive criticism or good advice, or you don't seek wise counsel. I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't let people who are not doing what you're doing discourage you from doing what you have to do. That is what I'm saying. Big up the Lion Pride on Patreon. Big up Stan Birch, our latest Patreon member. Big up Ras Maki, who just joined the Ubuntu Lion Pride. Big up all of the ones, the Patreon family that checked in with us today. All of our global growing community family. We have some special content that we're getting ready to drop. Look out, we have Ras Pizzle episode. He's a mathematician. He's doing math works in Jamaica. He's going to be the next episode of Lion Talk. So we're continuing the STEM reasoning. I see Sister Eden says STEAM too. And,
bring in the steam. Bring in the steam.
A little bit of steam. I purposely didn't say STEAM because I think we're good with the arts. Arts are part of us. To be right, we need to be STEAM, but I just wanted to put that emphasis, because I don't want to funnel too much people into the arts. We don't need that. We're good on that.
But let me tell you though, we require a lot of beauty in our work just as well. You know what I mean? So it's just like that's the other part that I had to learn. So the art, if you talk about it from a aesthetic perspective, you know what I mean? People don't buy cars all the time, because it's like, I mean, even though it's a well-running engine, but it's at the same time you want to have a comfortable environment. You build a house, you want to have it something looking decent, So I had to learn a little bit more about the contribution that the arts bring to the equation, So I love the art portion to it. But you're right, though. I mean, we don't need any. The thing is, it's such a natural, and I think that's the thing with engineering too. It's a natural thing for us as a people. You gotta remember, our ancestors did this over 5,000 years ago.
Yes, we're the first engineers.
Yeah, and so we did it since Imhotep time, and before, so we already had developed to a high level over 5,000 years ago. All right, so I had to learn, about that, and so the humanities part of it is also like a little bit of part of the equation, and understanding the arts. But right now we're so behind with our key aspects. We do need to focus in on the raw technology, the raw engineering,
science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I'm gonna be bringing Rasses who are excelling in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We, of course, have the artists will be here, the creatives. I'm the founder of Rastafari Creative, so I already am there. But in terms of the science, technology, we don't see enough Rasses who are, and we have them. It's not that they don't exist. It's just that they don't do interviews. It's just
it's true.
That you're not going to see Kulcha in an interview. I know them though, so I can find them. And I can bring them to the family. So now, a young Ras who's in high school or who's in college can say, you know, I can do engineering, I can do math, I can do, you know what I mean? That's what we want to spark with this. I can be a computer scientist. I can be, you know what I mean? I can be a scientist. I can open a
Yes.
lab. You know, we have Dr. Machel, who runs the ganja lab at UWI, who did his doctorate in Aki. I'm gonna be bringing him forward at some point as well. We have Ross Peter, who is a biochemist. I mean, what was he? Yeah, he's biochemistry. These are races, you know. So everybody I'm talking about are people who hail the majesty and acknowledge the divinity. I'm not talking, and we have Pan African family too. But I
Don't
want
forget about the technicians too. Sorry to cut you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have certain people that, you know, are high end welders, you know. So it's just the people that do everything from welding to electrician to plumbing.
Yeah.
I think that's not part. They're the people who actually get the work done. You
It's true.
understand?
And I'm gonna
You know,
bring some of them too.
we can put it on paper, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, these brethren got to execute, you know what I mean? These brethren and sisters, them, they have to execute. And so it takes those skilled laborers, it's the technicians, you know, that really deliver the goods for I and I. So don't, Ross Eon is one of the brethren them in the area, you know, he's a high
I'm
top
glad
level.
you reminded me. Yes, I'm glad you reminded me about these.
Don't forget about the technicians. So much love to all the technicians out there too.
So you hear that, the plumbers, that we're going to bring all of those ones here. We are the only platform that is bringing this amount of Rastafari goodness to the island. So support the platform. Why? Because the time has come for the lions to tell our own story. And this is the lion's voice.
Haile, Selassie, yes,
Greetings, this is Warrior King, and the time has come for the lions and the lioness to tell their own story. This is the lion's voice. Give thanks and praise for the wonderful blessing that's been poured on me. Give thanks and praise. Jah use I as an instrument to set the people free. Jah give her the powers to chant. Jah give her the powers to chant. Rastafari, the lion's voice.
What are you waiting for? Come together, calling from near and far. Know who you are. What are you waiting for? Rally up, it takes the dust. What are you waiting for? Ancestors paved the way for us. Yes, I am Ketis Oyonde, asking, what are you waiting for to come together? The time has come for the lions to tell our own story. This is the lion's voice.
Yes, job people, this is Michael Shemai representing. I will say, hear the lion voice, saying it is time for the lions and the lionesses to tell their own story. King David killed Goliath with a stone, we original dread.
The fittest of the fittest shall survive. My people, open your eyes. Wake up. Blessed love, this is Queen Omega representing for all lions and lionesses. With the lion's voice, we come to tell our story. Rastafari, live it. Hey, the lion's voice. Rastafari.
It's AWTITUDE representing for Lion's Voice. Yes, massive. This is the time for I and I, the lion them to tell I and I story, our story. Yes, and we reign and rule like this. Reign and rule, yeah. Selassie, I reign and rule. You can't take the lion vibes, people. If you no fool, cause we no Selassie reign and rule. Reign and rule. Selassie, I reign and rule. Queen Omega drop them in the fire, pull from them, no Queen Omega, she reign and rule. Royal Kushite, ancient essence, Emperor Selassie in a majestical presence, flash of all sevens, projecting through I and I events. We sing a song for the king, we bring joy and blessing and understanding, yeah. We hear Jah every day. Hey. Reign and rule, yeah. Selassie, I reign and rule. Yes, I lion vibes, Selassie, I reign and rule. Attitude say that. Boondocks, Black Organization of Global Diplomats optimizing expressions to the world. Till the world, till the end.
Amina, the time has come for the lioness to tell our own story. No surrender, no retreat, we are Jaja soldier. Rougher than the streets, tougher than a boulder. Bigging up Lamb's voice. Now put it. I Jalifa said that.
I will never stop, hail the Most High, and I will never stop, call Rastafari. Blessed love, this is Kushite representing for the Lion's Voice. We are here to tell our own story, Rastafari.
Yeah, David Dread of Steel Person. I'm saying hail to Lion Voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Oh, yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Well, Lion Voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion Voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion Voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion Voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion Voice.